Jury selection is underway for a very high-profile murder case that was captured on camera and sparked nationwide protests last year. 3 white men charged in the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man killed in Georgia while out for a jog. The 3 defendants, including a retired police officer, pled not guilty to murder and aggravated assault. For more on the jury selection process, let's bring in ABC News' Elwin Lopez live in Brunswick. Elwin, I saw it coming down on the feed. You were able to just speak with Ahmaud's family. What did they tell you?
Well, listen, Kara, this is a momentous day for them, and it's just the beginning, and they understand that, but they have been looking forward to this, both Ahmaud's father and mother. Take a listen to what they had to say. Is there any reason for you to doubt that, Ms. Wanda?
No. I think we will get justice for Ahmaud.
Is there something that we have not talked about that you think is so important to bring to light?
I'm just very thankful at this point that we made it to this day. Back in February of 2020, we waited 74 days before we actually got an arrest. And to actually be able to move from that point to today, it's just a blessing from God.
And you said something, and I vividly remember it. You said, I'm not going anywhere. You're going to hear my name. You're going to hear my son's name. And here you are today, more than a year later. What is that feeling like?
I feel like I've done what a mom is supposed to do, because the day that I laid Ahmaud to death, the day I laid him to rest, I saw him for the last time, and I told him these words, and I will find out what happened. And I will bring whoever did this to you to justice. And everything's unfolding, and I'm very, very thankful.
And Kara, I also asked her about what Arbery's best friend said after Arbery's death. He said he wanted to be an electrician, and also said that often Ahmaud would ask him, you know, what is my purpose in life? And I asked her about that, and she said that his purpose in life was to bring about change, and that she believes that this trial will bring about even more changes than have already happened. Kara?
We also learned that nearly 1,000 people were mailed jury duty notices for this case. How long do we expect the process to take now, Elwin?
Yeah, so just to give you a sense of how many people that is 1 out of roughly 85 residents here in this county. So it's really a wide net of people. So we do expect that this will take up to 2 weeks, potentially longer. And that is what it's going to take to be able to get 12 jurors seated and those 4 backups, Kara.
And the case heavily covered in the media, and the video swamped social media feeds. How tough do you think it's going to be to find good jurors here? Well, listen, I talked to both prosecution and the defense team, and they both say that they believe it's going to be not difficult to be able to get a fair and impartial jury here. But that is why they're also taking so much time, and that is also why they've cast that wide net, 1,000 potential jurors. And I want to read to you one of the questions in that questionnaire that went out to these potential jurors. It says, how much do you think you know about the case from any source, in parentheses, and then you have a 1 to 10 scale. And that cell phone video that you mentioned, that's a key part of all of this. Remember that it wasn't until that cell phone video came out that any arrest took place, and the national outcry, the outrage that we saw not only here in this community, but across the country, that is something that prosecutors and the defense team are very well aware of, but they do believe, as does the mother of Arbery, that they will be able to get a fair and impartial jury in this. Kira? Well, this killing, as we all know, happened in a very small town there in Georgia. How do you think Ahmaud's death has changed this community?
It's rocked this community. I can tell you that, not only from being here over the past day or so, but also just from talking to people. We've seen community organizers out here. They've been holding up signs saying, I stand with Ahmaud. They've been praying, chanting, singing even. And this has not just gone on for today, but also yesterday. And we know that they've been holding these rallies for more than a year. So not just recently, but I can tell you that also changes. We know that the citizen's arrest law has since changed since Arbery's death. And also the state now has a hate crime law, which they did not have before. Kira?
Elwin Lopez out in front of the courthouse there. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, attorneys in this case, thanks, Elwin, attorneys in this case are asking prospective jurors a series of questions in order to narrow down the jury pool and get to that final 12. But the judge will decide on what questions the attorneys are allowed to ask these prospective jurors. Some questions that will not be allowed have to do with whether a juror or someone he or she knows have been involved in citizen arrests, whether they believe any white person who uses the word N-word is a racist. Those questions disallowed by the court. But these lawyers will be allowed to ask whether prospective jurors support the Black Lives Matter movement and whether they agree that the Confederate flag is a racist symbol. It's an interesting stage of this important case, so let's bring in criminal defense attorney Tamika McCoy for more on jury selection process and what we can expect from the trial in general. Tamika, thanks for being with us. How important are these questions, and what do you make of how the judge is shaping them?
It's critically important, and what the judge does not want to do is to create an environment where jurors are eliminated who otherwise could fairly assess the facts that will be presented before it. The overall goal essentially is finding individuals in this community who are not predisposed one way or another, who remain open and will basically decide on the evidence that will be presented. That's the challenge, though, because the case is so widespread and widely known that everyone has come into contact with some information one way or another. So the questions are designed to get at whether any of these individuals can be fair and impartial.
And so they're looking essentially for fair-minded people. So what do you expect from the jury selection process, and why these questions are so critical to be asked or not asked?
Well, there are some questions that are kind of red flags. For example, whether or not someone may have heard anything about the case. So if a juror presents themselves and say, oh, I've never heard anything about what had happened, it will kind of seem a little odd just because of how well known this case had been and that community being so small and apparently closely knit. So those are things that's going to scream out at either defense or prosecution attorneys. And I've sat on both sides. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney. And at the end of the day, both sides are going to want people who are not predisposed. But getting to that is going to be the trick. And you're going to have to read through sometimes what people say, because what you don't want is people who are ringers that want to be on the jury, who already have their minds made up one way or another and want to cloak that so that they could get past this voir dire process. So the judge is going to work with the attorneys in rooting this out. The issue concerning the Confederate flag came up because the defense essentially moved to limit information regarding the truck that was used to pursue Ahmaud Arbery. So on the front of the truck was a vanity plate that had the old Georgia state flag on it, and within that flag is the Confederate flag. And the defense essentially do not want photographs of the truck shown throughout the course of the trial. Well, we've yet to see what the judge is going to rule regarding that. I doubt that those pictures are going to be excluded. However, that's the crux of why information regarding Confederate flags and why jurors' feelings about it may be something that attorneys want to find the answers to. The other trick is going to be whether any of these potential jurors have posted anything on social media expressing opinions about the case.
So, Tamika, the defense is expected to make the case that the suspects were doing the right thing by just looking out for their community, and they shot and killed Arbery in self-defense. How much of a challenge do you think they face with this?
It's a hurdle that they're going to have to get over. So they're using essentially the Georgia Citizens Arrest Law. It was a law that came into effect in 1863, and it was basically used to apprehend escaped slaves from being able to run away and have citizens have the authority to detain people in that respect. Well, as a result of this case, and I'm sure for other reasons, that law was subsequently repealed. But what they essentially are claiming is that they were under the belief which was reasonable, that Arbery had committed a crime and they were detaining him for purposes of having law enforcement actually come to the scene. They then also painted a picture that Arbery essentially attacked Travis McMichael, the younger guy who had the shotgun. And in that attack, the gun discharged and Travis McMichael essentially was defending himself against deadly threat. That's going to be really difficult because the video itself shows, you know, the color of the environment of what was going on, and it's a little different from the characterization that those individuals had initially provided the police when they were initially questioned. So no juror is going to ignore what they actually see. The question is going to be whether or not they are skillful enough to interweave that defense in a way that seems reasonable and digestible. It's going to be very difficult for them to really be able to achieve that, though.
And Tamika, while the judge is being very careful around these issues, the Confederate flag and those things, the federal government has charged this as a race crime, as a hate crime, I should say. There's no question that race is in this case, right? I mean, how does the judge handle that? And is that something either that the prosecutors have to prove, or the defense has to defend against, or something we're just not going to talk about, that we all know what happened? A bunch of guys driving around a pickup truck with a Confederate flag on it, chased down a black man and killed him.
Right, and it's tricky because there's a jury charge at the end that talks about cross-racial identification. And a part of what essentially was going on was these men were under the impression that there were a string of burglaries happening in the area, and Ahmaud Arbery was responsible for those burglaries. Well, there's no evidence that really ties him to any other burglaries. And actually, there was only one burglary reported about 7 weeks before this shooting, where someone had stolen a handgun from the McMichael's truck that was parked outside of their home. There's no information or no evidence or anything that really connects Arbery to any of these burglaries. The day in question, Arbery was jogging and apparently stopped at a construction site to admire work that had been done. In the process of stopping on that construction site, these guys essentially pursue him under the impression that he had committed a crime. However, no crime actually had been committed. And so in their pursuit of a citizen's arrest, they're arresting him for a crime that actually didn't happen. And that's the other problem that they have to get over, in the nexus of this case. How race figures into it is Brian, the guy who joins the pursuit, who captures the video on his cell phone, actually makes a statement to the police that when Travis McMichael had discharged his shotgun, there were 3 shots fired into Ahmaud Arbery. And he basically makes a statement saying that Travis used a racial epithet while standing over Arbery's body. Now, the McMichaels deny that claim, deny that accusation. There was also text messages in Travis McMichael's cell phone that uses the N-word. And those are all absolutely going to be part of the federal case. It may or may not figure into this case. What the prosecutor is going to want to do is stick closely to the facts and try as best as possible to explain their motives as maybe being racially charged, although it's not the explanation for why he was gunned down or why they associated him with the burglary in the first place, because it's kind of a little bit of a trap to get into laying out too much about the race, because it kind of takes away from what the ultimate evidence is, and that's going to be the video
of the homicide itself. But we are aware of the history and of the behaviors in this case. It is a fine line that they will be walking there, and I know that you're going to be helping us with it. Criminal defense attorney Tamika McCoy, thanks. Good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.